What's up, everybody? It's Pendarvis Harshaw here at Stay Diff in Oakland, recording a podcast for Pops, which is brought to you by Dads Evoking Change, a nonprofit helping Black men navigate the legal system in terms of family court. I'm here today, sitting next to Brandon. Brandon, thank you for being here. How you doing today?
I'm all right. Thank you for having me.
Brandon Martin is an entrepreneur and so many things. A business owner.
Developer, consultant, predominantly in the cannabis space. Worked in performing arts and digital art and multimedia for a while. Yeah.
Juggling a lot, but on top of everything, you're a father.
Yeah. Primary to everything, I'm a father, yeah.
How old is your child?
He actually turned 7 yesterday.
Happy belated birthday, a Cancer.
Yeah, we both Cancers.
Nice. And on top of being a father, you are a father dealing with the court system right now. You're in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been dealing with the court system since 2016. Self-represented up until the past several months. I wouldn't recommend that, but a lot of us don't have a choice. I definitely exhausted most of the free resources that are available to self-represented litigants, and I've learned, through trial and error and trial by fire, really, like the most critical context, when it comes to what's at stake, how to do that, which is also supported by like out of court conduct resource and ability to actually like raise and manage a child and kind of do what is objectively in their best interest. And even doing that, it really is an insurmountable hill to climb unless you have collaboration from the other party as well, at least in intention. You don't always have to agree, but y'all both have to objectively put your child's development before your own what have you.
That's what I want to pull from you in this interview. I want to pull for some of the lessons that you gleaned from your experience and hopefully share them with people who are going through similar situations. Like the whole goal of this podcast is to create a toolbox for fathers, again, navigating the legal system, especially as it pertains to child custody. And before we get there, I wanted to just lay out some of your story. You said you have a 7-year-old, but you've been dealing with this, the legal system for 6 years.
Yeah.
And so bring me to the start.
Excuse me. So my son's mother and myself, we actually, this will be brief, this part of it. We'd been together for on and off for several years. We knew each other. We were friends growing up, so we knew each other since like junior high. Ended up getting pregnant, wanting to stand in that and show up for that in the ways that I feel are, and I was taught to, I know are appropriate, and responsible. Very volatile relationship that was very short-lived. And the problems like with the stability, even from the time our child was conceived, like that began through pregnancy. You know what I mean? We didn't even cohabitate for a lot of that time. It was clearly unsustainable, and I was taking on a large brunt of what's required to build a life for a child, resources and otherwise. And then ultimately, once we stopped living together, which was shortly after he was born, back to the point, she didn't want to deal with the system. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with where I'm coming from and kind of advice to new fathers or fathers in unstable situations. Really, that's if you're not married. I mean, it has nothing to do with like trust or respect. It's just responsibility. Like we're in a legal world and a legal system, and like in order to, if there's no problem with the person that you're dealing with, then there shouldn't be a problem like establishing parameters, in a legal sense around that. And emotions get, certain ways, but then you can seek support and you have support. The thing is, no young, especially like colored male for the most part, is eager about engaging the legal system
at all.
Who wants to do that?
Right. Right.
Bruh, even if you want to be a good father, which I would honestly say most of us do in our own like capacity to understand what that looks like. You know what I'm saying? And fortunately, my mother raised me really well, and I didn't have a good father, and it wasn't even on no street stuff. It's just he is an asshole, and I was his last child from, in his life, and he had other situations, and my mom did a fantastic job. So I was always looking forward to that opportunity. And Yeah, so wanting to avoid the legal system and trying to be a good father and really putting my ego to the side because I'm very alternative in certain ways. And at the time, so was his mother, but identity shift and how people cope and whatever else. But we aligned in certain ways at that time in those things. So like when it comes to breastfeeding, when it comes to like, and even just my own understanding of childhood development, like I respected his need for peace at that time. Like I could have even leveraged the law against her at times during his early childhood development, where it probably would have been beneficial for me to open a case when there's like a DA restraining order, domestic violence restraining order against the mother, right? But I also knew that like extenuating those circumstances would or whatever the word is, exacerbating those circumstances would then ultimately, you know, from the most basic levels of like cortisol in her breast milk and the inability for her to manage her own life and emotions. And this is based on whatever an individual may be going through, right? Her life was not stable. Her family situation is not stable. And that's who I had a child with. That's my responsibility at the end of the day. And and you don't know what you don't know until it rears its head, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, nah, I'm not going to press charges. Like, you know, I just called the police because I wasn't trying to navigate this conflict in the way that she was trying to navigate this conflict. And, but, you know, in hindsight, that would have been structure that might have been to her benefit, or it might have been a ego check that might have been to her benefit, right? And it ultimately would have protected me against like further attacks to come. And, you know, me thinking that, okay, let me show benevolence or like, let me focus on the child. I'm kind of giving this and I'm going in tangents to say, like, if you're in a situation when it first starts that there's not stability established, go to court, establish it, meet with a mediator. That costs money. But what I'm saying is you could file relatively for free if you need the resource, like you can file for a fee waiver and they'll give it to you relatively easily. But you can get help, you can file. And at that point, it's not conflict based. It's not like, you know, just make sure you can represent how you support and how you can support your child. And you have a plan. Like the more you present to the court that they don't have to do the work for you, the easier you make it for the court, the more likely they are to like see that you're on top of stuff, that you care, and to agree with or to give, you know, at least more credence to what you're requesting. They don't want to do that work ultimately. And that's another side of this that can really come back to bite you. And so even early in my son's life, like before this was a legal situation, and much to my disadvantage because I wasn't proactive legally, but I was morally trying to do the right thing. I had an attorney who was a family friend, Deborah Sloan. I think she's retired at this point, but like instead of having her like help me build a case for custody, which she would have done for free because she was a family friend, I asked my son's mother to like make an out-of-court agreement and use her to facilitate that, right? Okay. Which then, because of the conflict of interest, she couldn't really represent me.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Family friend.
And even if she still could have, but it was because she had met with my son's mother and I already about our situation. And
so, gotcha. Like, so she's on both sides.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And so had I just been like, nah, that's my resource, let me just fight this, you know, it would have been different. But I was trying to do the right thing. I also, and this is objectively speaking, this is a good thing. If the Children's Hospital of Oakland, they have amazing programs and resources. And like Sarah Grunstein, shout out to her in early childhood development program. Like I enrolled Omi Sol in that, even though he's an amazing child, amazing intellect and emotional prowess. Like there's nothing wrong with support. And even just back to black males, dads, there's nothing wrong with support. And especially when you're dealing with a child, these are good things. Two, they provide objective, professional reporting. Yep. That can very much so help you if it becomes a court situation.
It sets legal precedent. You have documentation. So when the other shoe lands later on, you can work things out. Okay, got you. So early on, you're saying you wish you would have established that, but bring me up to speed, because during that majority of the first years of your child's life, you had sole custody, correct?
No. So I was trying to work that out with her amicably. So I also was in therapy, and I asked our therapist if she would. Ultimately, I found insurance for my son's mother. I got her enrolled in it with my doctor's office, which provides like mental health services, and they provide therapy. And so I was doing all this constructively, and because there's things she also struggled with. And like, that's not like, we all struggle with certain things, but especially if we're talking about like a lot of us, whether we know it or not, like, or women in those situations, or people who are acting in like erratic ways with like children at stake, you know, chances are they're dealing with something emotional or psychological, like otherwise too, you know? There's some pretty like extreme things that have gone on in my son's mother's life and her upbringing that inform how she behaves in these contexts. And so I knew that. And so I was trying to provide therapeutic remedies and support. So early on, it was we were in therapy. I had done that, and we were trying to work on stuff. Things started unraveling, if I'm gonna keep it a buck and not getting too deep, especially because of medical stuff. But like, things were starting to be revealed, and for one reason or another, this is direct contest. Therapy was abandoned. Emergency temporary orders claiming all types of wild allegations were filed against me. And that's the thing. Like, we were in therapy weekly with our infant child, and like, my son's godfather, who I told you about, who's a mandated reporter and PhD, like clinical psychologist who works with children. Like, I was going out of my way to I have family friends who were meeting with us and would like treat her to meals and stuff. And like, you know, because I have really good relationships and people who really love me, and would like treat her as if she was my wife, but it was someone who I didn't even like being around, because I wanted to be able to spend time with my kid, and she was claiming that she didn't feel safe around me. So I went above and beyond without anybody telling me to, you know, just because I wasn't, it's like, whatever, bro, I'm resourceful. So she ultimately snuck an emergency, like, to establish legal custody. She tried to claim abuse. Didn't work. The standard is 50-50 custody. Like, here's the thing. Even if you have no if you have no legal order, one, the police can't do anything. They won't do anything. Nobody can enforce anything, really, but ultimately the child's welfare is what's primary. And I'm saying that, like, myself, whoever's hearing this included, like, focus on that. There were times, granted, where my child was truly better, like, we're talking his whole life, but early childhood development is different, right? There were periods, though, where it would have been highly beneficial for my child to just have an established place of residency that might not have been his mother's, but she would have had complete access, however, you know, that needed to happen outside of us cohabitating. So yeah, that's how custody was established. It wasn't, you know, either of us going to court or me being asked to go to court to establish paternity or anything like that. She tried to sneak an emergency, like, allegation order against me. I was alienated from my son for 2 weeks. That's actually how I spent my first Father's Day. Oh. Yeah. So then, and the court procedure in that regard is, one, they rush the hearing. They assume there's no evidence that a woman has to provide for these things. Like, they can make up a story, and if it doesn't sound too far-fetched, then the court will grant it, and it's an expedited hearing date because they err on the side of caution. They don't want things to happen to women and children. I get that. That makes sense. That's not a flaw of the system. That's a flaw of intent. There's no consequence for manipulating or lying to the system, even if it catches you. The point isn't to impose consequence. And honestly, as fathers, don't fear this stuff either. If you haven't done anything wrong and you're not doing anything wrong, like, be calm, be responsible, engage the system, because like, there you do have legal protection and legal rights, and just understand that as long as you're not pompous about it, like, there's a certain presumption that is the standard, you know? And so 50-50 custody was established, and she could not validate anything she was saying. It was absurd. Had I filed actual, like, filings in response to that, I might have gotten custody at that point.
Full custody.
If I'm going to be real with you. Yeah. I just showed up to court. I
had just engaged.
Yeah, like I had a stack of character references, like, and people who, I'm not saying people who were my friends that liked me, like, she relied on me in a lot of ways. Like, she cohabitated with me when I was like helping to low key raise like the woman who owned the home's like young son at the same time, and like, you know, so it's unfortunate when a certain level of like trauma causes people to engage a certain way or manipulate a certain way. But like, unfortunately for her and fortunately for me, like, I had the truth, my integrity, my rapport on my side. Like, so there are these people who facilitated our meetings when my son was an infant. Like, all these people were like, oh, no, Brandon's like, not only is he great, is he a great father? And I've been with them, and I've been with them when they're working things out as co-parents, but he's been great with my kids, and and so, but I just brought that stuff to court, and we can get into legal procedure, and I can give people game, but so can attorneys that have been on here, and, you know, people that I'm interested in connecting with, because I got so much to learn, and I have limited resources. I have goals in the future, and I'm not trying to get bogged down bog my child's life down by BS. But Yeah, so the presumption is joint custody. I had 50-50 custody established at that point, and then it comes down to schedule, logistics, things like that, right? And
No, sorry. Again, this 50-50 schedule, all that is established outside of court, just with the mediator.
no. We were forced to. You have to go to day of court mediation. You have to go to mediation,
okay,
right?
gotcha.
I left that out. Thank you.
Gotcha, okay.
They require you to go to mediation unless it's like if you already. If you caught cases, I'm gonna just keep it a buck. Like, this is not a friendly system, and it's not funny. Pardon my coping. If you got cases, bro, if you don't have like a stable place of residency, or like, it doesn't even have to be verifiable income. But granted, if she starts attacking you on that, you're gonna have to show that. Then, you know, like I said, my son's mother isn't the most stable or like integrated individual herself. But you know, anyway. I was also like a off grid artist, and you know, like hustler, right? So I'm not tripping off of that stuff, but yeah. So they force you to go to mediation, have your shit together, and not even for mediation, but just for like your ability to show that you can have custody of a young child, you know, first and foremost, and then. When it comes to so if there's nothing like what's it called, no other extreme circumstance that then would hinder the legal standard of mediation, you'll go to day of court mediation to try to work out. Court always wants you to work stuff out of court.
Right.
Thank you for actually bringing me back to this point. Like, and if you like try to do that, try to do it amicably. Like, don't project blame. Do it in documented means, at least by email. And quite frankly, fathers, if you propose, like, nobody wants to have to do stuff that, especially things you feel like you shouldn't have to do, or like it's not your problem. But like, if you proactively introduce like, hey, like, why don't we take this parenting class, or you just do it, and it's a certified, like, court approved, and you can show that certificate, or it's like, hey, like, I think we should go to therapy, or I'm in therapy, like, why don't you join me? Or you make amicable suggestions of like for your child's development and future, and you like, even if they argue, project, like, if they try to like pitch, like, just don't. I'm not saying just don't, and I've argued enough myself. Don't get me wrong. It's very, very hard. But what I'm saying is, like, if you show the actual behaviors and the other person is not doing that, that will give you a much higher standing in court. It don't matter if you're male or female, black, white, or an alien. Like, that's how the court's going to look at that. And they'll be able to see objective truth through that. Some judges, some court appointed or family court services employees, they're horrible people at the same time. I'm gonna be real. And these systems are systems, whether it's capitalism, whether it's the court system, whether it's built based on class. And that's before we get into like racial and gender implicit biases. You know what I'm saying? And those things, as much as they try to mitigate for that, it exists.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, yeah, it's a part of our society. So of course it's intertwined. It's in the fabric of it all.
And you're ultimately facing all of that. Like, your passion is going to be seen as aggression, you know, or your whatever. Like, it's just the way that it is. So the most that you can mitigate that for yourself, the best standing you'll be giving yourself. But then, yeah, they'll force you to day of court mediation. Focus on the kid. And really, and this isn't something I had to learn because of the disposition that I was coming from. That was always my focus. Like, he was born into my home. I was stable. I'm a good father. I know how to nurture children. He's, you know, his mother didn't have a stable place of residency. Berkeley's a fantastic public school district. Like, he was in preschool, so on and so forth. And so, focus on the child in mediation. The mediators will see that if there's anything that they need to know, that it's tough, because you don't want to come off like you're blaming the other parent or focusing on conflict. At the same time, mediation, what they report, is going to have a huge influence on what the judge ultimately decides, because to that point, it's a short cause hearing unless you request a long cause hearing, and there's a reason to grant a long cause hearing to go to trial. That's a lot of court resource. A lot of time, if you don't have an attorney and there's no real reason for that, chances are the judge isn't going to grant it, because that's a meticulous process that requires like sophisticated legal application.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm involved in pretrial right now. That's after 6 years of going through short cause hearings. I didn't stop at home before this. I was almost going to bring like, bruh, I've done collegiate level. I'm a Division I athlete, college, not grad, but, you know, business professional, went to university and have gone through college for a lot of units. And the level of work that I've done to learn, file, like F up, document, like articulate, understand legal jargon, understand formatting of documents, like legal procedure, like how departments work, how, like it's insane. You know what I'm saying? The level of work. And so as much as you can do the work on the front end.
How did you do it? That was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Like, is there YouTube University? Did you reach out to people?
6 years of various depression, anxiety, reaching out to homies who had gone through it and who were going through it, that ultimately they can only tell you as much as they know or don't know or have messed up. You know what I'm saying? And I have great friends, like, I mean, some phenomenal people that I know that I've grown up with that, you know, were always there for me, that provided me resource when I needed it, provided me, you know, presence and like solace when I needed it. And a lot of people don't, like, I'm really blessed, bro. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Like, I could have if I wanted to make a legal fight out of something, but once again, like that's not nobody wants that, especially people that fit our demographic. So like, what you can do is lawyer up with the right attorney. But I've had lawyers, I've had mediators, I've had therapists tell me like basically fuck the family court system, or like attorneys. I've had homies who are real estate like developers and like that got money basically. You know what I'm saying? That have been like, man, like that hired an attorney. Like it's such a minefield, bro.
Yeah.
You know, and like if you don't have the right disposition, I'll make this positive. And like I said, I talk a lot, so hopefully y'all already know. But to get to the linear trajectory of it, and I'll anchor myself there. Like, so we went to mediation and it went fine. The standard of 50-50 was established. His schedule at that time was like 2-2-5, which is a standard for children who shouldn't spend too much time away from either parent, and that's in their tender ages. So, but it's difficult.
Sorry, 2-2-5 meaning?
2 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on, 5 days off.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And so, yeah, y'all switched, or it's, yeah. So like y'all switched that way. And, if you don't have, like collaboratively anchored logistics with the child, then that's difficult.
Who's going to pick up? Who's going to drop off?
We were told, but it's still like every 2 days at whatever determined time, which is typically like the standard would be like 12 p.m. Right? You know, you have to plan logistics into not only your life, but a child's life in a way that is not really conducive to their thriving.
Right, exactly. In the middle of a soccer game.
It's just like, wild. And so once again, if the other party's not trying to work with you, then it causes conflict.
Of course, right.
And the court then ultimately will let conflict escalate until I'm starting to learn and recognize like the wisdom in this that's bigger than me. But like, they're, you know, either resource gets things done, the right attorney and paid the right amount of money, and so they'll make legal moves happen that you don't even know that can happen. You know, whatever petition filing or motion or whatever else, or the standards are more or less going to apply. And if like we've been through like 6 different mediators, bro. Like she's tried to file she's never filed for proactive like transitioning like requests for our child, or like, you know, even change like legal requirements, change of address. Like she tried to move him out of the county, and I just refused to transfer him and called the police. And she ultimately agreed to go back to her grandmother's in Fremont, which is where she lives now. And like, but had I not stood that ground, she would have tried to take him to Riverbank because she couldn't maintain stable residency. And, you know, then ultimately might have been able to establish like, nah, that's illegal what she did.
Yeah,
basically. Gotcha. And so but that's the thing about it. That's the thing that, and ladies, whoever's watching this, I mean no disrespect, but there's a certain level of ownership that mothers typically feel over children that really does not apply. On the other hand, if you don't show that you have enough respect for that, then you'll be penalized. You know what
When
I'm
you say
saying?
it doesn't apply, you mean legally?
Legally, yeah.
Like in the
you
natural
can't
state,
just take your child from a, yeah.
in the natural world, I mean, she carried this child for 9 months.
Yes.
So that's like I did so much. But
that is a real
she
thing.
did so much more.
That is a real thing. And hopefully, like, the bond between the two people that created that life, like, sustains, like, honoring that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're trying to take advantage of somebody and you're involved in the legal system, you signed your rights away to a certain degree as well, and your child's rights, and that's something that we can get into as well. But so at that point, it's not morally nor is it legally justifiable to just do things with a child outside of your legal right to do so.
Makes sense.
You know, this is ultimately a contract and something that you'll have to stand accountable to. And I'm saying that in that sense to say that a lot of times fathers don't do that simply because they don't have the leverage and we don't have that natural relationship.
Right.
You know, nor legal. Anyway, but if that's being done to you, go to court. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's what I'm saying. Like it's really not okay. Sometimes women, though, they'll just up and leave. And if they leave the state with your kid or like whatever else, that's a whole nother fight then. And it doesn't matter like what the legal precedents or moral, like, unless it's seen in the eyes of a standing custody order as like abduction, then you're going to have to deal with going to court in 2 different jurisdictions and the process of serving and like proving what's best for the child. And ultimately they might decide that it's best for the kid to stay in the state that they were illegally taken to. You know, like, it's really not cool.
It sounds like a headache. It sounds like a lot of money. Sounds like a lot of time, a lot of emotion, a lot of energy.
Yeah, that's not my situation. I'm just dealing with a typical, which is far too common.
Yeah. So bring me up to speed. What exactly are you dealing with right now?
Pre-trial negotiations. I've dealt with an onslaught of allegations my son's entire life. Like I told you, including how this even started while I was providing all of the like resources and you know, structure for us to try to do things in a amicable way. So she's facing contempt. I'm representing myself in that because it's a lot of legal work and that work is less daunting. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm the petitioner, you know, so like I just have to make sure that I can uphold the legal standard of what's it called? Seaman. This stuff is.
Wait, sorry. So before you describe what your role is, what is the petitioner?
Petitioner is the person who filed the most. Like, so, like she routinely has broken custody orders, like legal custody orders, right? Now, you don't want to cause like I don't do this to cause conflict. It was because these are things that have been either they were critical aspects of it. You have to be able to prove there's like 4 domains of like contempt that you have to be able to prove the person was aware of the order. They like there has to be clear orders. So that's another thing. When you get custody orders established, like go through every detail. Like even if they're not going to acknowledge all of it, like have yourself prepared for like make it as specific and direct as possible, because that's all the law and the police who would enforce it out of court, or the judge when you go to court. Like if you try to enforce an order that's ambiguous, you can't even hold the person in contempt, even if common sense says they knew what they were doing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
But
like
lay it out plain and know all the rules of engagement and see it in real time.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Like any game you would play, anything you get engaged in, you want to know the rules of the lay of the land. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for extrapolating that. And so, these are clear orders that she had broken, and it was beyond like, if you have like a schedule and you don't get your child and they don't do anything to try to rectify that, or like to ahead of time, like plan and resolve that with you, that's contempt. Like that's a clear, like you can't break the schedule. Oftentimes it's not that cut. Like I've dealt with that in the sense that my son's mother has just left him with me because for whatever reason, she didn't want to have to acknowledge the fact that she wanted to do other things instead of like pick up her kid when she was supposed to. And she didn't want to have to try to negotiate that with me ahead of time. So she just then dumped him on me and then like let me know like 2 hours before we were supposed to transfer. And then I called the police to file the report, simply because like at that point I had dealt with too much with her and this was happening like too routinely. And then when I would try to work it out with her, she would try to gaslight me, like literally, you know what I'm saying? And there's also stability issues there. So I was like, nah, bro, like So at least a police report is objective, and it's something that a court or a mediator will look at immediately, as opposed to listening to two people bicker, right?
Gotcha. Okay, so slow it down. So now you have petitioned. You've said there's an issue here. We need to get things straightened out.
Yeah.
Look at this agreement that we had before. You need to prove where the issues are according to the agreement, and also you need to make sure that your character is upstanding when you bring this forward.
Not in the contempt sense. Like, you need to make sure your character's upstanding all the time, like in custody court. Like, to be real. And it's wild too, because like, I'm a pretty well spoken and well put together dude. And I've observed other cases, right? And like, where I see like, you know, people get real out of character. You know what I'm saying? Like, cats that like, you shouldn't be representing yourself, or like you have really gotten in trouble and now you're here having to deal with a judge, or you don't have your kid, and I get it, like, you love your kid or you have ideas about that, but you're in court acting a fool, bruh. And it's wild to me to see the lenient. You know how like teachers will hold students accountable to their level of ability,
Their potential.
Exactly. So like, because I might present a certain way in court, like, there's the things that I'll get checked on in terms of when I'm communicating, how I'm communicating versus what I've seen in another context. I'm like, wait a minute, bro. Like,
you didn't hold them to that standard.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
But like, it's ultimately like, he was breaking the rules, and if the judge wants to hold certain rules, you know what I'm saying? Like, they can do that much easier with me, is ultimately what it comes down to. But there's not going to be any yeah, you'll get held accountable to standards. I don't know where I got to that point from, but
No, got you. Okay, so I'm just bring me into the world. You know, that's and so.
Okay, no, keep yourself on your P's and Q's all the time. Like, that's just how that is. When you're filing for contempt, though, if you file for contempt, and this isn't something I'm saying to use. Like, judges don't like having to deal with this, and the person who's facing contempt, so this goes for fathers too, like, you're entitled to a public defender because it's a quasi-criminal offense. This also sucks because there are rules around like making sure a child's life is sustained and properly supported, and judges will like assert these rules to the parties, you know, when they're establishing them in court. But your only remedy to enforce that is to file a contempt motion.
Gotcha.
That makes you a criminal prosecutor, basically.
That's heavy.
And this is a civil / like family court issue. And I get it because the consequences for being held in contempt of court are like jail time and or fines. They're, you know, at the same time, the level of due process and procedure, public defenders can find loopholes just to get things dismissed. And that's what you're gauging, like managing a child's life on. Like, the public defender it's not even that they should care about the kid. Like, it's just like their job as a what's it called? An aspiring attorney, like a new attorney and paralegal, is to work these cases, and their client is their job. And
win the case.
And how to get their client off. And so, like, it's not really about the reality of the child's life and like what these things are doing to the child's life at that point. If it were just the judge looking at the orders that judge put in place, and then utilizing the clear context to then like adjust rules or adjust orders, like, that would be probably much more comprehensive. But based on just legal stuff is legal. Legal technicalities and legal systems are legal. Even if a judge wants to look at some a certain way, they have to make sure that they're operating within the confines of what's not going to, you know, garner an appeal or a mistrial. So like, you know, so saying that to say, don't frivolously file contempt, because it's an arduous process and it's not necessarily going to resolve the conflict. It will get the court to look at what you're filing for, but also, if you're doing it frivolously, they're going to be upset with you.
Wasting time. So wait, what is the goal of this current case right now?
The contempt motion?
Yeah.
One, the opposing attorney tries to manipulate context and reestablish grounds in order to lawyers play chess. Right. A lot of lawyers play chess, especially when they have nothing tangible to reinforce their position. So to break that down, like, my son's mother almost lost custody before COVID. She was able to sustain that because her attorney pretty much dragged out at least at that moment in time, what she tried to argue was necessary to really determine custody. And even though like a mediator report had gone deeply into, and the mediator report is what said physical custody should go to me, legal custody to the mother. There's all these issues, and this is ultimately like where both of these parties are at, who's been doing what, who's been making what attempts, and what might be the real problem. Right. Based on that, the father should have full physical custody. The attorney argued because of COVID and because of remote learning, and then other like things that she tried to pile on that, they need to look into to see if this is really the right decision, which you can, again, I get it when we're talking about kids, but we had already gone through like 4 years of this, right. Like multiple, like out of court services, therapists and stuff like that. But it's a new attorney who ultimately doesn't really care. They're just trying to get what they can out of the situation.
In the case,
yeah. And so reintroducing all types of things or destabilizing it in a way that's not in our child's best interest, but ultimately allows week to week remote learning custody schedule where his life is getting split between opposite ends of a large county, let's say, because of the pride attached to having to relinquish that control.
So, but your goal, just to be clear, your goal is full custody.
Yeah, my goal would really be for his mother to be stable, or at least orient her life that puts others before her own identity conflicts or lack of stability.
Gotcha.
She doesn't though. And that goes as deep as even imprinting ideas of like moving closer to where our son's life was established, like on our child, or agreeing to things like this when it's like suggested by a co-parenting counselor. And then like literally like trying to keeping him from his first week of school because we're on this schedule that I told you. And she got him back that Sunday. It just so happens before the Monday that he started school. I had been reaching out to amicably like plan. I even offered to like help her, commute him in the mornings, or like it asked if she needed like money for gas to support, because like, even though it's not my fault, she's not stable and she has to live with her family who's in Fremont. But like, that's our kid, and I get it. And that's what the custody schedule is. And so like her and her attorney, his therapist, his court appointed therapist had recommended like not destabilizing him. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Especially at the start of school year.
And he had been preparing for it. And like, I had been preparing, his therapist had been preparing him for it. Like, but she can't control the parents. And ultimately like, she's not a custody, you know what I'm saying? She's a therapist. And so she has, again, a scope that she can work within. So his mom got him back and kept him from school for his first week of school while trying to find ways with her attorney to unenroll him. And I had to almost legally represent myself through the school district up to the superintendent, who then finally looked at all of these documents, these court orders, and was like, on top of it, she tried to enroll him in a remote program in my school. Like, she don't have proof of residency. She can't, you can't legally do that anyway, but they tried to do it behind my back. Not confer about it, which is illegal as hell, against his therapist's recommendations, and ignored my inquiries about how we were managing his first week of school in order to try to do this covertly, and then ultimately got caught. But what's worse is it requires my proof of residency. It's like she don't live in the city that she's trying to like uproot and re-enroll him and stuff in.
Right.
On top of not having legal order nor like right to do it. So that failed. But what I'm saying is our 6-year-old child, from the, preparing for school with his father, thinking his mother is going to be moving to like what he's going through, and then ultimately being kept from his first week of school, like that's not cool.
Yeah. That's this whole conversation is going to boil down to that question of how is this impacting your child? What have you seen?
Well, he's being put in the middle. He's being put in the middle of pretrial negotiations, temporary orders, and all types of destabilization right now. So what it's doing to him first and foremost is he probably doesn't really know what stability is. He's never experienced that in his life outside of the bedroom and home that he has where we live. But that's only half of his life, right? So that I couldn't really say what like outlying personality effects it has, or emotional effects, because his entire life, and this is something I'm kind of thankful for, like I was never disillusioned in the like this. I've never been frivolous about these types of things, like when it comes to like intimacy on this level, but at the same time, I would have endured progress for the sake of establishing a family the right way. I wasn't disillusioned in this idea that like I was building a life with a person, you know what I'm saying? And so like I was able to, I think, discern like what was sustainable and what wasn't really early on, and just like start my son's life in a way that it was probably going to be maintained, you know? My parents split when I was 4. I remember my father. I remember when they lived together, but it wasn't really a part of my identity, you know?
Right. So you weren't missing.
I didn't feel the loss.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I had a really good life with my mom. Like, and she did that intentionally as a very committed, like professional woman and single mother. And so like, I had great family, you know, my aunt, his mom and stuff. So anyway, like in Omi Soul's regard, the things that hurt me is when he doesn't have to, I've tried to protect him from, I was also very adulterized growing up. My mom was codependent in a lot of ways and very like transparent. And so like it added a lot of maturity and like ability to navigate and survive. But I think the biggest ways in my situation where it's affected my kid is like, I want him to maintain a lot of innocence from this situation and from the world, bro.
Yeah.
And I also have very intentional parenting ideals that like work when he's with me.
Yeah.
She's different. She would think, and I'm not saying she's not good. Like she's really good with kids, but she's barely good with herself. If we're talking about moral foundation, and she didn't have I'm not going to bash somebody that some people who are watching this will know who I'm talking about, but there's no way to really find that. And it's not even neither here nor there. It's just, the moral foundation of a young man and like the routines and habits that you build through early childhood development and like the foundation that you set. My son's an amazing person. A lot of people who might see this also know him and have seen him and see us interact. And that's all very real. That's the realest thing. But like he's modeling who he's becoming off of his environment and the people who are showing him, giving him emotional information, like psychological information. So the way that it's affected him is like, he's smarter than he needs to be, if that makes sense. Like from a survival standpoint, like he inquires about things, he knows things, he's aware of things in a way, and I have to meet him in that because that's what's responsible to do. And I'm able to articulate these things, or I'm able to really like hold space and presence and grounding in a way that like I'm not causing more of a conflict for him in his identity or like the binary in his life, but I'm also having to make his life make sense with and for him because I don't have support of the other side. And when I say support, I mean like even like not even information. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
She doesn't, there's a lot of things that don't bode well for her. Like, so this, like, I'm not like, a lot of this also works to my advantage in court. I'd rather stuff just be cool for our kid. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Right,
there's
that's
no
the point you're coming from.
I have nothing to gain, like only stuff to lose once it's at this point. There's nothing to gain. Like there's stuff to protect. So like, I would never want this. Granted, her lack of stability gives me leverage in certain ways, or at least a buffer. He suffers.
Right.
He has to figure out, he has to be the bridge. You know what I'm saying? And he's a well-equipped child. I'd like to think it comes from, you know, whatever DNA and time and presence I put into him. And I'm not, you know, a slouch myself, but, or things like, yeah, he's anxious in ways that a lot of kids are, like, but he's very socially adept. Like I've made sure of that. He's in school. I've made sure of that. Like she was trying to make sure, like force him to be homeschooled. Codependent. She's not even anyway.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
All right. Stop there. Pause the breaks. But the secondary final question as we walk away from this is, I know it's impacted you in a myriad of ways, right? And for people watching this in similar predicaments, any resources, guides, tools that you've used to navigate these years that you've been experiencing this?
Resources. There are a lot of free resources. Very few productive resources. You could spend a lot of time like sorting through or getting redirected to Alameda County Bar Association, self-help facilities, all those things. And like, it's great to visit those resources. Research. Like, if you're representing yourself, you're going to have to understand how court filing works. You're going to have to understand what petitions and what motions are necessary to get certain things done. You're going to have to know how to communicate to the court and what communication is relevant. Go to Family Court Services to figure that out and ask direct questions. So you'll have to know what questions to ask too, though. And that's the difficult thing about, advanced education and Latin and things like
Latin, goodness, right?
So like these things there's a barrier to entry with these things, that to even navigate it, you have to understand the language. You have to understand the rules. And that's where a lot of it's trial by error. I learned a lot from observing other cases, man. I mean, like, especially while things were remote, I would just leave. Like, even if I had to appear, because you're never like by yourself. It's, I would watch other cases.
It's like traffic court. You sit in there,
exactly.
You wait for your name to be called or number to be called.
Yeah, they have a certain calendar, and if they don't get to yours, then your situation isn't going to be heard until the next calendar. It doesn't matter how critical it is for your family. Stuff like that sucks too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think to start with resources is like, try to be the best resource you can be to yourself.
Yeah.
Don't spend too much time looking for a magic solution, because it does not exist. It's just not there. Like, there's not this government and these communities, like the county doesn't have resources for things that it needs resources for. So like, best believe, and a lot of people will tell you like, oh, look for a pro bono lawyer. Like, there's this organization, there's that organization. There are organizations that will help you manage, help you meet people that can potentially like, and I can't list all of these organizations. I'm sure you can direct people. And and if I had my resources in front of me, I could direct people. Reach out. If my contact is anywhere on here, reach out through Penn. Like, I'm happy to talk to people and be more focused and direct in those things. But those peers, those friends, people who've been through it and who've actually experienced the system, talk to them. A lot of them are going to be jaded as well. And like, their unique circumstances are going to apply to their situation. So you can just pick and pull. You can make yourself more comfortable with engaging it and understand what to expect in different levels of it, by talking to people in support groups, people who've been through it. You can also find good community resources that, like, I've been directed to attorneys who might not have been able to help me, but like gave me good advice and were willing to work with me or consult me to a certain capacity, because like I was referred to them by somebody they knew. Unfortunately, I'm ingrained in the community in those ways. So start there for real.
It sounds like overall, like, one thing that you've done, you're not saying it explicitly, but you've spoken up.
Speak up. Yeah. Don't go through this alone. Yeah. I mean, you can't go through it alone, really. You can't go through anything alone. Excuse me. Yeah, I ask for help. Always ask for help. Like, and know that you need help with this. Like, if you're not paying for an attorney on retainer, you need help.
Yeah.
If that's not where your life is at, where you just throw money at legal fees to fix your problems, like, you need help with this. Trust me. And this is I've been through 3 knee surgeries, like knee surgeries, Klay Thompson type shit. Played Division I basketball. I've been entrepreneurial. I've been damn near homeless at times. I've hustled. I've seen people killed. You know what I'm saying? Like, my mother is elderly and has health issues and has almost died at times. Like, this is by far the most difficult thing. And I haven't lost my kid. I've always had my kid. By far the most difficult thing I've ever dealt with. Like, if I didn't have good friends, I've had nervous breakdowns in the middle of the night, bro. Like, sobbing tears, like calling my best friend, like, with no answer to receive. Like, so I can't even quantify what it takes. Yeah. Resources. You see, like, you know what I mean? And I'm a very expressive person, like I told you, and I can try to make y'all feel and come into, and illustrate what I've gone through. But like, if you want to be a father to your kid, once again, unless you've already set yourself back in certain ways, nobody's going to stop you from doing that. That's what I can confidently say. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that. You're going to have to focus on that as your number one priority. And if for whatever reason your child is objectively in a situation that isn't as binary or like, you know, I think like paternally like validating as mine happened to be, you might have to like accept that L in certain ways. And it's not an L, it's more so just like